then it's Mr. Freeze underway from fourth. Jesus' team is fifth, and they're into the stretch. And Knicks Go just keeps on going. He's got a 2-length lead with a furlong to run. Complexity is second. Then to the outside, Sharp Samurai trying to put in a bid from third. But Knicks Go is still well clear as they come down to the final yards. And Knicks Go goes all the way in the dirt mile.
Welcome back to Racing Rundown. Today we have a preview of the Pegasus World Cup Dirt. This is our first preview of 2020. I do have to apologize. I did talk about a couple weeks ago on the podcast that we would have a video talking about myself and Eric's top 5 2-year-olds coming out of 2020. That will be coming next week. I do apologize for the delay in the publishing of that video, but that will be out at some point. But today we'll have our first preview of 2020. It is the Pegasus World Cup, the first grade one of the year. $3 million is the purse. Mile and an eighth for 4-year-olds and up, and we've got a full field of 12 horses. So we're going to do the usual drill, go through every single one of them, and I will have picks at the end for the top 3 in this race. And we'll go to the first horse in the race, number 1, Sleepy Eyes Todd. This is a horse who's had some very good success throughout the year, whether it's at some high-level graded stakes like the Charlestown Classic, or even in some regional races going back to really early in the year, back during the deep times of the pandemic when he was running at Fauner Park, when Fauner had their really successful spring meet back in April and March of 2020. He won that stake that he ran in there. Following that, second in the Lone Star Mile. Then he won the Charlestown Classic. That was really his big ticket race of the year. Disappointed in the Awesome again, but that was a race where he was running against 2 of the top older horses in the United States in Maximum Security and Improbable. And I think, even the most optimistic person on Sleepy Eyes Todd would be able to concede that he's not of that level. But he bounced back 2 races at the sprint distance. He won the Lafayette, one of the black types that was on the Breeders' Cup undercard, and then most recently won the Mr. Prospector over the surface at Gulfstream. So a win over Gulfstream, definitely a very good thing to see. I value that a lot in horses that I pick. The one concern that I do have about him is the fact that it was a pretty light field that he beat in the Charlestown Classic. He beat them very impressively, and I wouldn't say that he can't win races, but I would question whether or not he's able to run against tougher company. Now, he's not running against some of the best older horses in the country. I think, most people would recognize that this is a race where there's a lot of up-and-coming horses, a lot of unproven horses, but I think looking at some of the horses that we may consider the top elders, like a horse like Charlatan, or even some of the 3-year-olds who won races like Happy Saver toward the end of the year who are not here. That being said, I still think he compares favorably to them, and given the fact he has won at the mile and an eighth distance and over the surface, albeit in different types of races, that's still a good sign for him. I just don't think, I think he's a little bit light in terms of the company that he's faced. But he does have a strong case in this race, given the fact that he did win that Charlestown Classic very impressively. And that's the one thing that I think if you really like him, you can cling to that race. The number 2 horse in here is Coastal Defense, a very interesting horse coming out of back-to-back 4th place finishes in graded stakes in Kentucky. He was 4th in the Lafayette, and then he was 4th in the Clark Stakes at Churchill. I thought that was a very good race that he ran in the Clark, even though he was 4th and was never really going to get by the top 2 horses in that race, Bodie Express and Code of Honor. That being said, though, I do think that it was a strong run for him, but with that said, the Fayette was a 4th place finish for him. The Fayette wasn't really the strongest field. I don't think very highly of Mr. Freeze coming into this race, and I don't think Coastal Defense is going to be able to make much of an impression. I think he's a horse to look out for in lower level graded stakes later on in the year, maybe into February and March. But in terms of this race, I just don't think he has enough body of success to show that he can run a winning effort in a race like this that has good horses that I think we would describe as better than him. Number 3 is Independence Hall, who ran his first stakes race for new trainer Michael McCarthy in the Malibu on the 26th of December. That was a disappointing 5th place finish for him, but that was a race in which Charlatan, who I kind of basically said already, I think is the top older horse right now. Charlatan absolutely aired in that race. No one was going to get to Charlatan, especially not Independence Hall, who was coming from the back. But the one thing about Independence Hall, and I noted this in the preview of the Malibu Stakes that I did. Independence Hall has never lost going one turn. A couple of stakes wins, the Jerome, the Nashua, and the maiden and the allowance race that he's won. All of those are going one turn. The Malibu also is obviously going one turn, but the 2-turn races that he's run in, the 2 times that he's run in 2 turns, was the Sam Davis at Tampa back early in February and the Florida Derby in March. And he didn't really show me that he is a horse that's going to have success around 2 turns. Those questions still remain. He has never really answered them. And I don't think this is a spot in which he would answer those questions. So for that reason, I'm against Independence Hall in this race. And the number 4 horse in this race, the morning line favorite and likely post-time favorite for this Pegasus World Cup, is the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile winner of this year, Knicks Go. Knicks Go had a transformation of a career following the trainer switch to Brad Cox. 3 for 3 last year, including the very impressive win in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. We know that Knicks Go has talent in him, obviously seen from the Breeders' Cup and going back to his 2-year-old campaign when he won the Breeders' Futurity and then ran a really good second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile behind Game Winner. The question that I have with him is kind of the same question that I have with Independence Hall. I've never really seen him be able to show me that he can go those 2 turns. The one race where he showed some ability was in the Breeders' Cup, but that was over 2 years ago, and I'm not really sure how much that still carries anymore. We saw him get beat pretty significantly in races like the Sam Davis, the Gotham, the Lexington, the Matt Winn, a lot of races that he ran in as a 2-year-old. One race that he did do pretty well in was the Ellis Park Derby, but that was really kind of the outlier of his campaign last year. A disappointing 10th place finish. Also came on the grass in the Commonwealth Turf Stakes at Churchill. So last year he was really impressive. We saw that in his allowance win at Keeneland in October, and in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. His allowance win at Oaklawn wasn't as visually impressive as those 2 races, but it was a good race in its own right. So we know that he can be very impressive going the 1 turn, but I'm not sure if he's answered the 2-turn question yet. And I'm not sure if I'm prepared to pick him yet because I have those questions as to whether or not he can go the 2 turns. I think he has the talent to do it, but I'm not sure if he just has the ability to be able to go 2 turns. It's kind of a bit of an oxymoron there. I think he is good enough to do it, but I'm not sure if he's going to get the right setup to put it in a better way. And moving on to the number 5 horse in here, Jesus' Team. This is a horse that, coming out of the Breeders' Cup, I and many other people was very high on. Jesus' Team is a horse who every single big race he's run in this year, he's fired a big shot. He was 4th in the Haskell, 2nd in the Pegasus Stakes, 3rd in the Jim Dandy and Preakness, and then 2nd in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. And then in his most recent effort, he finally got away from a lot of those big-time horses and was able to win the Claiming Crown Jewel. So we know that he has a lot of talent. The one thing that I would say about him is I don't think Jesus' Team is a win candidate, but I do think Jesus' Team is a horse who you can peg to run in the top 3. We've seen that from him in every single race he's run in since he was 2nd in that allowance at Gulfstream when he was beaten by Soli Volante in that race. And I should correct myself, in the top 4, the one race in that streak was in the Haskell, but in the Tri or Superfecta for Jesus' Team. So I think he can do that. I'm just not sure he's shown that he's able to win at this level yet. I could be wrong though, but that being said, I am a little bit reserved on picking him to win in this race. The next horse that we're going to move on to is Kiss Today Goodbye, who was a surprising winner of the San Antonio Stakes at Santa Anita. That was a race that featured the comeback of Mucho Gusto. A lot of people thought that was going to be a warm-up race for him coming into this race. The Pegasus, talking about Mucho Gusto, didn't happen for him. Kiss Today Goodbye had to battle in the stretch against Idol. He also was having to come get a lone leader who had been on the lead and was running pretty reasonable fractions, not fractions that you would think would cost a horse a victory in Take the 101, and he was able to get by mid-stretch and go on to win the race by half a length. So it was an eye-opening performance for him. I think that was the kind of race, and there are several horses in this race that I think fit the quality that Kiss Today Goodbye has, of the horse that is up and coming, just won a stake, We don't really know what their ceiling is, but I think he has the potential to show that he is a horse that is going to be able to have some success going forward. I also think that given the fact that he is a California horse in that division, usually around this time of year lightens out as all the big horses go out to the Middle East and run in those big races over there, kind of leaves horses similar to the archetype of Kiss Today Goodbye to kind of pick up the pieces in races like the Big Cap and the San Pasquale, even though Kiss Today Goodbye probably won't make that race given the fact that he's running here. But I think he could establish himself as one that could run very well in some of those California handicap races that are going to kind of be lightened out by horses going out to the Middle East. So I think he's one that I'm very optimistic about going into this race. In some of his other races this year, he ran decently in the Shared Belief Stakes. Again, there were only 4 horses in there, but he was within a length and a half of winning the race. And again, we talked a lot about on the show last year how we didn't really think any of the horses in that race were that good, but he wound up winning a graded stake, the San Antonio. So obviously there's some talent there. The next horse we're going to get to is Tax, another one that I would kind of put in the same group as Kiss Today Goodbye. He's coming out of a very impressive win in the Harlan's Holiday, and that was also magnified in how impressive it was, given the fact he was coming off of a very significant layoff. He hadn't run since a disappointing finish in the Oakland Handicap earlier in May of 2020. He won that Harlan's Holiday by open lengths. It was a very visually impressive performance. It was against a pretty weak field. I'm not going to say that was he beat an elite group of horses very impressively. So the class of the field that he beat there definitely is a question, but visually it looked very good. And if he was hitting another gear in that race, which could very likely have been, then that looks very good for him going forward. He's always been a horse that has shown on his best day that he's able to compete against top horses like this. He won the Jim Dandy back when he was a 3-year-old. He was 4th in the Belmont Stakes and also was 2nd in the Discovery as a 3-year-old as well. So some good efforts for him overall, and I think if he is improved with talent, and that Harlan's Holiday is indicative of him improving in talent, then I think he has the potential to run here. I'm just not sure if that win in the Harlan's Holiday translates to the ability to beat I don't want to say top level horses, but the level of company he's running against in here. The next horse we're going to go to is Harper's First Ride, a really good Maryland bred who's been very consistent throughout the year running in races at Pimlico and Laurel. He's got 4 stakes wins and a 5th race in which he was 2nd in, one of those races being the Grade 3 Pimlico Special, in which he finished ahead of Owendale, who ran very well in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Before that, had good efforts at the allowance level. One disappointing effort did come at the Monmouth Cup, where he was running against horses that I would say would kind of be, this kind of Grade 2, Grade 3 level horses. So that's the one thing that I look at that, and I'm not really sure whether or not I think he can translate his success in Maryland to Florida. This is going to be the first time he's running in Florida. He's run outside of Maryland, hasn't really ever produced much outside of an allowance win at Churchill. So that's obviously a concern, and just the overall class of the fields that he's beating. But, I did give him some props for winning that Pimlico Special over a horse, Owendale, who it probably wasn't his preferred distance, a mile and 3/16. And then Owendale did go on to run very well in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. So he does have some class coming out of that race. Do I think it's enough to win this race? Not sure. I think that's a bridge we have to cross when we get here to this race. But I do think if you think that success from Maryland is going to translate, then he may be one that you can look to take a shot at. 10-1, if you think that success is going to translate from Maryland, it's not a bad price at all. The next horse we're going to move on to is Last Judgement. This horse draws in after True Timber, the winner of the Cigar Mile, pulls out of this race. And Last Judgment is kind of what you would expect from a horse who, for all intent and purposes, wasn't also eligible for this race. There's not much in terms of success for this horse. Disappointing efforts across the board in graded stakes black types. He is coming out of a win in the Sunshine Classic, but that's the quick turnaround, plus the fact that he's never really had a lot of success at the listed and black type level, much less the graded stakes level, really leads me to question whether or not he can run in this race. That wasn't really any kind of spectacular group that he beat also. Was his first win in a while in a stake race, but like I mentioned, that field wasn't really anything to write home about. So I think Last Judgment kind of fits the bill of the also eligible that just drew in because another horse defected, and I don't really think he's going to run too well in this spot right here. And the number 10 horse in this race is Code of Honor, a horse who I had, and myself and a lot of people, had really high hopes for coming into the year 2020. But unfortunately, that wasn't really the case. Code of Honor, I thought, was one of the biggest disappointments of the year. Disappointed in a lot of the major grade ones he ran in. He didn't run terrible in the Met Mile. That was a third place finish. But he disappointed in the Whitney and the Kelso. I thought the Whitney was the most disappointing race of his year. And it didn't really look like he took a step from 3 to 4. But the Clark Stakes definitely did change that for me, that perception at least. He ran a very good second to Bodie Express in that race. And Bodie Express was going to be very hard to go by in that race. But Code of Honor, I thought, coming from behind with a lot of ground to make up in terms of the distance between him and the leader, and the fact that Bodie Express had a fairly easy trip on the front end, given those excuses for not being able to get past him to the win, I thought it was a very good victory for him and a step forward in the right direction, something that I wanted to see from him if he was going to have a chance in a race like this. And I think that effort, given the fact that he has run well at Gulfstream in the past, does give some strong indications that he can run well in this race and could be a candidate to win if you don't like a horse like, say, a Knicks Go, think that he may not be able to get the distance like I do. And so for that reason, I think that Code of Honor does have a very good chance in this race. Obviously, he's the second choice at 9-2, so the odds makers think that as well, and his record does demonstrate that. But I think that the questions about him disappointing last year do exist, but I think that there is a reason that he ran good in his last start. And the next horse we're going to move on to is Mr. Freeze, the second place finisher in this race last year. Mr. Freeze has been a horse that's been very weird throughout his career. Very consistent in lower level races, but when he bumps up to high company races like the Met Mile he ran in this year, the Ali Sheba was a grade 2. Even though it was a grade 2, that was a grade 1 caliber field. And then in the Dirt Mile this year, disappointed in those races, but if you remember back to last year, ran a really good second to Mucho Gusto, and is a horse that can run well in races where there's not really tough company, but once he steps up to the tougher company, he isn't really one that you consider is one that can get the job done in here. And I don't think that Mr. Freeze is a horse that's going to be able to win a race here, and I don't think he's going to be able to run as well as he did last year. I think, the best bet we could see from him is an effort like he had last time in the Clark. That wasn't a terrible effort, but it also wasn't a winning effort for him. And for that reason, I think that Mr. Freeze is just a horse that is going to run mid-pack, maybe on the upper end of mid-pack, but I don't think he's a win contender in here. And the final horse that we're going to move on to is Math Wizard, a horse who I'm just going to say it right now. I've never really been a big fan of Math Wizard. If you've been a frequent listener of the show, you know that neither myself nor my co-host really think anything highly of Math Wizard. He hasn't won a race since he won the Pennsylvania Derby in 2019, and there have been some very disappointing efforts from Breeders' Cup level races to some lower level races like the Monmouth Cup and the Charlestown Classic, well beaten in races like those. So, and he also last time was very well beaten by Tax in the Harlan's Holiday. I just think that, he had a very fluky grade 1 win in 2019. I don't really think anyone would argue that race was anything but fluky, and has disappointed consistently in most races he's run. And he does have the odd good effort, but overall, Math Wizard doesn't really run A-plus races, and I don't think there's a reason to see an A-plus race coming from Math Wizard. He hasn't won since that, and he hasn't really been competitive in a lot of these grade 1 races. He hasn't really been competitive in the 2 grade 1 races he's run in since that Pennsylvania Derby. The Breeders' Cup in 2019 was 5th in that, and then was 5th, very well beaten in the Charlestown Classic this year, and also in the Woodward. I mixed up the Woodward and the Charlestown Classic on the past performance chart. The Woodward was a grade 1, well beaten in that, and very well beaten in the Charlestown Classic. But, like I said, overall, I don't think that that's very surprising. This is a horse that won a fluky grade 1 and hasn't really had much success since then. And obviously, I don't think he's going to win this race. And now we get to my picks for this race. Like I mentioned, I think that there's several horses in here that are up and coming that do have some very good chances to win this race. I think Knicks Go is a very deserving favorite. That Breeders' Cup was very impressive. I have distance concerns with him, and I'm not really sure if he's going to be able to carry it the 1 1/8. So for that reason, I'm actually going to look away from Code of Honor. I did indicate that I may pick him, but I'm actually going to go a little bit of a price angle here. I said a lot of nice things about Kiss Today Goodbye. I think Kiss Today Goodbye has the potential to win this race, and so I'm going to pick him in here on top. Did really like that win that he had last out in the San Antonio, and I didn't think that that was a bad field that he beat either. There were some pretty good stakes level horses in there, or horses that I think will be pretty good stakes level horses in the future. So I think that his future is bright, and I think the other horses, a couple of the other horses in that race, I do think Knicks Go will be second in this race, though. I still think he's going to run a really big race, even though I don't think he can win it. And for third place, I hyped him up a lot. Jesus' team. I think you have to include Jesus' team in this race. The value that you saw in the Breeders' Cup and the Preakness may not be there, but he's still a reliable horse to use underneath. So that's my top 3. Thank you for stopping by. We will later on this week have a preview of the grass race. Eric will be doing that, and we will see you next week for when we will be recapping the Eclipse Awards and having final prediction videos for a couple of those awards. So we will see you then. Have a good one, and if you do play this race, good luck.
At the top of the stretch, it's Take the 101, Mucho Gusto on the outside, Idol running a big race down at the rail, a furlong from the finish, Idol coming gamely. Here's Kiss Today Goodbye, finishing very strongly in the center of the track, and Kiss Today Goodbye swooping up on the outside, and he's going to run them all down. Kiss Today Goodbye beats Idol, Take the 101, and Mucho Gusto.